Hey everyone, looking forward to enjoying the service together. If you are joining us for the first time, you're already part of the family. Why don't you scan the QR code below? This will take you to a menu system and there are prompts that you can follow if you want to connect with us or if you have any questions. I want to encourage you, join us in person for services, join us for the full experience, and we can't wait to see you when you come through. But right now, let's enjoy the service together.
I'm going to give you the title right up. It's called Building a Legacy We Can Be Proud of. Building a legacy we can be proud of. This is so important because as you've heard on the promos and as you heard Teb say tonight, we're leaving a legacy. The good news is every one of us is leaving a legacy. Is the good news every one of us is what? Leaving a legacy. No. Passion. Each and every one of us is what? Leaving a legacy. The challenge is what kind of legacy are we leaving and are we going to be intentional about it? So if you are an alcoholic, you're leaving a legacy. If you're a drug addict, you're leaving a legacy. If you're stingy, you're leaving a legacy. If you're grumpy, you're leaving a legacy. If you're uneducated and you don't do anything about it, you're leaving a legacy. If you're lazy, you're leaving a legacy. If you don't have a great attitude, you're leaving a legacy. Every one of us is leaving a legacy. In fact, every time we connect with someone, we've left a legacy. Even if it's a 10-second conversation, leave a legacy. So can I encourage us to recognize that when we're not intentional, let me say it differently, if we were unintentional about what legacy we're leaving, we could be leaving a legacy we don't want to leave. What on earth will people say when they see us dead? What will they say as an obituary? What will they say as one of those testimonies in church? Would they get up and go, well, he was a real miser. Stingy as hell, but hey, he had a big business. Rest in peace, brother. One step further, would people come to your funeral at all? Wow. Sure. See, the size of the funeral is often a reflection of the size of your impact. And the reason I ponder that is maybe because I've turned 40, so I haven't finished. No, don't be cheeky now. I hadn't finished. I said I've turned 40 10 years ago. And you as you get older, you start to process things a little differently. And for me, like, legacy is a big thing. Genuinely, I'm a bit obsessive about it. What are we going to do? What is the church going to do? What is this church going to leave? What are Nix and I going to leave for our children? And I'm not talking about monetary things. I'm talking about what investment are we leaving today that's going to help them leave a better legacy. Because to be honest, I want my kids to be better than me. I'm dysfunctional in so many ways. You know this. And you're a living proof that God's a miracle worker. You keep coming back. I have no idea why. But we leave a legacy, each and every one of us, every word we say. But I want us to be intentional, because if we can be intentional, we can leave something different. You see, history is littered with people who've left legacies, good and bad. It's littered with them. You and I can all be a part of that in some way. I'd imagine that for most of us in the room, we've had someone who's left a legacy that has been inspiring and motivating and empowering in our own lives. My father was not a follower of Christ for most of my life, but he left a legacy in the things that he taught me, work ethic, for example, manners and respect. My dad wasn't Afrikaans, but my gosh, he was close. I never forget, if I was even remotely disrespectful, there was normally this very solid sensation on one of my ears. And my dad was a fitter and turner, so his calluses were bigger than rugby balls. So when he adjusted my manners, it was normally a thud of note. But he taught me many things. He disciplined me. He trained me. He said to me, I don't know whether I've told you this, that if I wanted to drive a car, I first had to learn how to work on the car. And I'm like, Dad, you know well, I'm about as gifted with my hands as a slug. And he said to me, son, if you want to drive the thing, you better maintain the thing. So he taught me stuff that I've long forgotten. But I had to work on a car. He said to me, my kids are about to learn this. If you want to drive the car, learn to change the wheel. My daughter's thinking, including me, especially you. And there's a journey to that because all of these little things leave a legacy. And all of these things matter. Each and every one of us have had someone who's done something in our lives that we're proud of. But there's literally thousands of people, millions of people who have left legacies, good and bad. I wonder where we will be, good or bad side. And in an article written in CEO World magazine, a list was compiled, I love this, of the most influential people in history. The analysis will be a bit surprising to some of us if you read it. But it was framed around people who had the greatest impact on history. And agree or not, it doesn't matter whether we agree with this analysis or not. The top 5, and some scattered along the way, I will mention to you. Here they are. You ready? Here's the first, Aristotle. The number 1 most influential person, according to CEO magazine, was Aristotle. Second person, Plato. Both Greek philosophers. Third, Jesus. Like, that's a bit of a concern for me. Third. That's like the second loser. Socrates was 4th. 5, Alexander the Great. Listen, the Greeks are everywhere. I just wonder that the person who compiled this list, hands down Greek, surname Papadopoulos. I have no idea, I'm just joking. 12th was Moses. 30th was Paul. 48th was Solomon. Like, hang on a second. The wisest human being who has ever lived outside of Jesus made 48th. It is a bikkie verkeerd. 73rd was John the Baptist. 73rd. The man who baptized Jesus didn't make the top 50. BBC published a list of legacy builders over the last 100 years. Here are a few of them. Mandela. This is no particular order. Picasso. This guy deserves it. Alan Turing. He's the father of computing. He was a code breaker. He was the father of computing. Johann Gutenberg. He deserves this list. He was the guy who invented the printing press and mass media. Incredibly influential man. Gertrude Bell, she was incredible, an explorer, a female explorer, did some amazing things. And of course, Marie Curie. She was a scientist that invented all sorts of things and discovered some really important minerals and chemicals and things that changed life as we know it. So really important people, right? Really influential. The question is, are we going to be one of those people or not? And I'm not talking about someone who invents something that changes the planet as we know it. I'm speaking more along the lines of we can change someone's life for the better. That there's just something in us that does something different. All of us are going to leave a legacy. This is the truth. The question is, are we going to leave a legacy we're proud of? And if we examine the society in which we live, we can see that it becomes increasingly apparent that the most important thing in life today is a wonderful 4-letter word, self. Yeah. Everywhere we look, every magazine we read, every motorcycling magazine we read, every publication we look at, the social media, movies, everything is propagating self. Everything is self. I want what I want, and if I don't get what I want, then I'm going to cause a scene. Can I encourage us today? For goodness sake, can we put self aside for just a moment? Because you see, life is obsessed. Life is obsessed with self-preservation, self-promotion, and self-glorification. It's everywhere. You know that more teenagers want to be social media influencers than scientists, doctors, and engineers. Oh my hat! Their greatest goal is to be on YouTube, running around opening a box and having 23 million people going, wow, I've never seen anyone open a box quite like you. Our children are consumed with social media, entertainment, and lifestyle content. Here's the problem. They're being exposed to, in increasing measure, to philosophical ideals of things like relative truths. Oh my hat, relative truths. Truth is relative. I once said to someone who was a postmodernist, a really, really fastidious atheistic person who said to me, the truth is always relative. I said, are you convinced of that? He goes, yes. I said, are you 100% convinced that there's no doubt that truth is relative? He goes, yes. I said, you've just undone your own argument, you moron. Truth cannot be relative. It's either true or not. Here's the reality. You can say here today, I think I'm in Benoni. You're not. You might say, well, it's my belief. It's my truth. Well, that's fine, but you're still not. What are you going to tell Garmin when you ask Garmin where you are? Are you going to say, Garmin, you're wrong? You might say today, you're wearing a yellow shirt. I'm not. You might say, but my truth, it's yellow. No. Your truth is you've got an eye disorder. You're colorblind. It's okay. I'm not knocking your colorblindness. It's just true. The truth is we have philosophical blindness. And our children are being exposed to ideals that are destroying humanity. They're being exposed to things like optional gender constructs. They're being fed sexuality and sexual inappropriate propaganda and pornography. They're being forced to watch age-inappropriate content when they're in primary school. This has to end. But it can only end when all of us go, no, we are going to leave a different legacy. A legacy has to change. And that's why children's churches, whether it's this church or any church on the planet, needs to be invested in. Because children's churches will say, no, this is not what it looks like. This is what it looks like. We can give them guidance and wisdom and hope and passion for Jesus. We can help them to see differently, dream differently, expand their thinking. Bigger people will have a bigger impact on the world. They must change, and fundamentally, children are the answer. Society in general, as we know, is seduced by the satisfaction of self. And all through history, we've seen people who have been seduced by the satisfaction of self. Listen, I'm not looking at anyone. This is not a political statement. Our ruling government is passionate about and seduced by the satisfaction of self. That's why there's no money in the country. But there's a lot of money in some of our government officials' homes. But self-obsessed leaders are common. We don't have to look in our own nation. We can see it anywhere. But here's a couple. Are you ready? Can I just draw your attention to some self-obsessed leaders? Are you ready? Look at the person next to you and say, I'm ready. Look at the person on the other side and say, I'm still going to leave a legacy. Here's the first. Attila the Hun. Oh, look at him. He massacred 40 million people in the Hunnic Empire in AD 334. How many? 40 million. He was so self-absorbed that he murdered 40 million people in AD 434. Here's another, Genghis Khan. He massacred also 40 million people. It seems like a good number. He was the leader of the Mongolian Empire in AD 1200. Then there was Timur. He massacred nearly 17 million people in Western Asia in the AD 1300s. Then there's Queen Bloody Mary. That's her name. I'm not swearing. Queen Mary burned 280 Protestant people alive because they had differed to her faith. And that was in the 1500s. Then, of course, as we get to a little bit more of a modern time, Vladimir Lenin, we all know him, massacred 500,000 people in Russia in 1917, many of which were his own soldiers. Joseph Stalin massacred an estimated 6 million people in 1917 as well. Imagine that. Adolf Hitler massacred 11 million people, including 1 million people under the age of 18. These are self-obsessed leaders. Mao Zedong massacred 40 million people. It's a very round number. I don't know why this is the case. In China in 1930. Idi Amin, back into Africa, massacred an estimated 3 million people in 1970 in Uganda. Listen, we can go on. I stopped counting. When I started doing the research, it was just mind-blowing how many genocidal maniacs, self-absorbed, opinionated people were destroying the planet. Here's the problem. We might not be destroying 40 million people, but we could be destroying 4 children in our home. We might not be destroying 40 million people, but we might not have a passion to see the nation change, so we prevent millions from getting to know Jesus. You see, the question is, what kind of legacy are we willing to leave? Are you being helped today? What kind of legacy are we willing to leave? You see, all of those men pursued their self-interest, but here's a question that we need to change. Around what or around whom does our lives rotate? In medieval times, people believed that the earth was the center of the universe and that everything rotated around the earth. They believed that the earth was the center of everything. They actually believed that the sun rotated around the earth. Then there was an astronomer by the name of Copernicus who believed that the sun was in fact the center of the universe, and around the sun, everything else rotated and orbited. It was called the Copernicus revolution. And it was so outlandish that people didn't believe him initially. And eventually his studies and his teachings caught on, and everybody started to believe and ultimately adopt and accept that to be true. His discovery became a legacy that changed the planet. Here's the thing. It changed the position in which we find ourselves. I hope you're catching this. You see, Copernicus's revolution helped us realize that we are not the center of the universe. The sun is the center of the universe. And you see, when you and I get to meet Jesus Christ, we've got to make a decision. Am I the center of the universe, or is the sun, S-O-N, the center of our universe? It's no longer a Copernicus revolution. It's a Christ-like revolution. We've got to learn that Christ is in fact the center of everything, and we rotate around him. Which means when a dude in a blue denim jacket and holy jeans says we should be generous towards the next generation, he's not saying that because he wants to enrich himself. He's saying that there's a generation that need to meet the sun, and they can develop a relationship with the sun. And around that sun, they will build their lives so that they can be completely revolutionized and live differently to the broken society in which we find ourselves. The society believes that self is the center of everything, that our comfort matters more than service to others, that comfort is more important than cause. We even take it far enough to believe that everything environmental matters more than even Jesus Christ. I was watching an interview the other day. I won't mention the organization, but this is an organization that are fixated in stopping the use or processing of fossil fuels. And they were banning oil and carrying on. And a young influencer, ironically, came to him and said, "So let me ask you something. How did you get here today?" To which the person looked at him and said, "I don't understand the question." He says, "No, you do understand the question. The question I'm asking you is, how did you get here?" He said, "By car." He goes, "Why didn't you walk?" He goes, "Because it's 30 miles away." He goes, "Okay, so it's okay for you to use a car, but no one else must." You see, the reality is every self-propagating, fixated experience reduces our impact because we're making fools of ourselves. Society needs to change, and it starts with legacy. Jesus, the Son, S-O-N, is the center of everything, and everything, including you and me, orbits him. So if that's true, then surely the legacy that we need to live through and for and leave is for him. When we accurately, intentionally, and consistently hold on to the truth that Jesus is the center, we can leave a legacy we're proud of because we're no longer fixated with self. You see, when we truly surrender to the worship of Jesus, when we truly put Jesus as the center of our universe, we orbit him and serve his cause. And each of us in this room here today and over the next 2 days, primarily because we believe, hopefully, in that cause. That's the Christ-like revolution. We vacate the center spot and place Jesus there. It enables us to see our life in proper perspective. Oh, that's huge. We got to see our lives in proper perspective when Copernicus came up with a theory, and then obviously the truth that the sun is the center. When we put the sun in the center, we position ourselves differently. Jesus does not rotate around our preferences or our comforts. When we look at the ideological philosophies we're dealing with, the gender fluidity discussions, the idea on what abortion is or isn't, what gender identity should look like, what biology is, the definition of race and gender, all of those things have to be put into the correct perspective. We have to put ourselves in the perspective of the fact that we rotate around the sun, not the sun around us. It enables us to put cause above comfort. Oh my word, that's huge. It helps us to make decisions and take actions that impact others for the better. We begin to leave a legacy that we're proud of. Why? Because here's the second thought. Leaving a legacy we're proud of requires self-sacrifice. It requires sacrifice. And Pastor B has spoken into that already, that there's a sacrificial intent needed. But look at this, Matthew 16:25. Are you ready? Matthew 16:25. Matt was a friend of Jesus. He was a guy that had it wrong. He was a crooked financier. He was a tax collector that was despised by the Jewish people. Jesus identified him with leadership potential. You see, it doesn't matter how we see people, it's how Jesus sees people. And he walked past and he saw Matt and he said, "Hey, Matt, come follow me." And Matt said, "Yeah, sure, no worries," and started to follow him. Matthew then walked with Jesus for 3 years and, long story short, documented some of the discussions that Jesus had. Here's one of them. For if you choose self-sacrifice and lose your lives for my glory, you will continually discover true life. In other words, self-sacrifice is the pathway to true life. But if you choose to keep your lives for yourself, you will forfeit what you try to keep. Jesus gives us a choice. He always has. Jesus is not commanding us, demanding us, and forcing us to do anything. He's inviting us to participate with him. And this is the decision he's giving us. He's saying, choose self or choose sacrifice. Self or sacrifice. It's an easy thing to understand, extraordinarily difficult to live out. Jesus encourages us to sacrifice self by placing him and his cause at the center of our lives. How do we sacrifice self? Jesus, your will be done. And that's very easy to say philosophically. So when we sit here at night, like, oh yeah, Jesus is good, we've worshipped, yeah. Until some of us are going to pray and say, what should we give tomorrow? And Jesus gives us a number. And we're going to go like, yo, Jesus. Like wrong address. You see, sacrifice, though, isn't as negative as we sometimes think it is. It's not as negative as it appears to be. Often we think of sacrifice with words like defeat or withdrawal or retreating. Sometimes we even think of sacrifice as loss, but it's far more beautiful. Look at this. Are you ready? Take a pic of this. It's going to change your life. Sacrifice empowers us to live intentionally, creatively, and responsibly. The cost of sacrifice appears extraordinarily high. But maybe we need to shift our perspective. Let's go back to the Christ-like revolution. Let's go back away from the Copernicus, away from the idea before Copernicus that everything revolves around the earth. Now listen, stop for a second. If everything revolves around self or the earth, it's very difficult to look at sacrifice as anything else other than disaster. But when we recognize that the sun is the center, here's the reality. The cost of not sacrificing is far, far higher than we think. Because the sacrifice positions us differently. Jesus said this, if you choose to keep your lives for yourself, in other words, choose self, you will forfeit what you're trying to keep. So we have an opportunity, if you like, an invitation to change the way we think. Because here's the challenge that we all face. If you and I are genuinely concerned about our finances, and we look at this weekend and Sunday, this Thanksgiving offering that you're being encouraged to step into. If you look at it and go, well, what will I have left? If I give, I will have nothing. I'm going to hold on to it. Guess what? You're going to forfeit the very thing you're trying to keep. Resisting him leads to missing our purpose, missing his provision, and reducing our influence. And we're going to see that over and over again. It's true of everyone who is stingy. If we're stingy with our love, we lose love. If we're stingy with our time, we sacrifice time. If we're stingy with our encouragement, we receive no encouragement. But if we're generous with all of those things, we receive all of those things. Why would we want anything different? You see, resisting him leads, ironically, to losing the very thing we're trying to keep. Losing the very thing we're trying to protect. Ever met someone who's extraordinarily jealous and controlling over their spouse? Come on, give me a wave if you've at least met one person like that. Yeah, a couple of hands here. How long do those marriages last? Or those relationships last? They always fail. Because the person who is so stingy with their time or stingy with their love and their freedom loses the very thing they're trying to keep. That's why that cliche is so true. If you love someone, let them. Because releasing is winning. You see, yielding and surrendering to the purposes of Christ is the pathway to true life and the abundant life he offers. It's a new life and a life alive with energy and purpose and passion. A life that makes a real positive difference. It's beautiful. A life that when we get and put into the right perspective changes everything. In fact, it's a change in the way we operate, a change in the way we live, and a change in the way we think about life in general. When we wake up in the morning knowing that our lives are making a difference, not that we've got big money in the bank account, because big money in the bank account creates a lot of stresses. Ask billionaires, they'll tell you. When we watch the news and you watch Financial Times and you read articles, one simple change in the economy can cost someone billions of US dollars overnight. And we're grateful because I lost $5. Make sense? You see, this abundant life was offered to Joshua. We don't have time to read the scripture, but I'm going to read the scripture. Joshua 1 verse 3. You ready? We just put fast ears on. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. I will give you where you set your foot. Where you? Gallery, where you? See, here's the key. God will give it to us when we take the first. I will give you every place you. Where you? So if we want God to do something, we have to do something. So God said to Joshua, take the people into the land. Where you set your foot, I'll give it to you. But you've got to get moving. You've got to make some sacrifices. You've got to get some stuff done. You see, while you're in the wilderness, I will give you food. While you're in the wilderness, I'll find you water. I'll protect you. I'll put a big fire up there at night because it'll keep you cozy. I'm going to put a cloud over you to keep you cool during the day. I'm going to take care of you. But if you want the promised land, you've got to get rid of the fire, you've got to get rid of the cloud, and you've got to start doing some shopping.
So good.
Be strong and courageous, he said, because I will lead these people into the inherit the land I swore their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. How? Be careful to obey the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the left or to the right, that you may be. Hang on. Be very courageous. How do we be very courageous? By carefully obeying his word. Don't deviate from it. If we don't deviate from his word, guess what? When we do those things and we're honest and we integral and we do all of the things that are godly and important and cause above comfort, here's the promise. You may be successful in or wherever you go. Don't be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord will be with you wherever you go. You see, obedience to God doesn't need to discourage us. Why? Because when we're obedient, he's with us. So God promised Israel land. He said, take ground because my promises are my best for you. He said, there's new territory for you guys. And I want to say this, there's new territory for us personally and as a church. And it starts with leaving a legacy we're proud of. And it requires courageous thinking and faithful obedience. So I'm putting aside our comforts and our fears and anxieties and even preferences at times for the betterment of another generation. It's about courageously obeying God's word even when it doesn't make sense. It means we've got to have courage because it's not self-focused. It seems counterintuitive. We've got to be looking on the outside. We have to resist our desires and getting our own way. We have to consider others before we consider ourselves. We've got to do what God asks even when it's tough. It's all of these thoughts and things that require of us to lay them down, because look at the promise. I will give you every place you set your foot. That's a quote from God. I will give you every place you set your foot. Here's something to think about. Without courageous thinking, we merely leave a footprint in the sand. We merely leave a footprint wherever we go, but not a legacy. It's easy to leave footprints in the sand, but footprints are never a legacy. We've got to sink roots to leave a legacy. We've got to lay concrete to leave a legacy. We've got to make an impact in people's lives to leave a legacy. It's a footprint in the sand blows away, or the water comes and washes it away. Footprints don't make any difference. Legacies make a difference. And that requires enormous faith, but it's collective faith that does all of the challenge. Our time is up. But I want to ask 3 simple questions. Are you ready? Are we collectively passionate about taking people closest to Jesus? Are we collectively passionate about taking people closer to Jesus? Are we collectively passionate? In other words, all of us passionate about taking people closer to Jesus. Here's the second question. Are we collectively passionate about building a legacy we can be proud of? Here's the third question. If so, what will we then be willing to do to make it happen? The weight of this hinges on our collective action. There's an account in history where 4 friends brought a paralyzed man to Jesus. These 4 men had faith for the 5th man. We don't know their names, but we do know that these 4 men believed that if they could get this friend of theirs to Jesus, Jesus would be able to heal them. When they got to the place in which they were meeting, it was actually Peter's house. The friend of Jesus, Peter, that Peter. And they got to the house, but the house was a little small. There wasn't enough room for everyone to fit in. Oh, can you listen for a moment? There wasn't enough? Say that again. There wasn't enough? Hear the picture? You just let your imagination flow. You know where we're going. The room was too small. So these 4 men, undeterred, climbed on the roof and dug a hole through his roof. I would have been ticked off if that was my house. And they lowered their friend through the roof at the feet of Jesus. It took the collective faith of 4 people to make a way, to find a way to win, to open up a roof, to let their friend meet Jesus. And they left such a stellar legacy that whenever someone reads this account, they are rereading the 4 men. They're nameless. We don't know what they did for a living. We don't know where they lived. We don't know what their friendship circle looked like. We don't even know what the paralyzed man's name was. He was just paralyzed dude. For the rest of history, we know 4 guys and a paralyzed dude. But 4 guys and a paralyzed dude went to Jesus, 5 left walking. You see, what they did is they carried their friend in faith. They dug a hole through the roof. They never let boundaries or barriers get in the way. They broke through barriers. They lowered him into the room. They brought their treasure, their best friend, their family member. We don't know. They brought their treasure to Jesus. And Jesus miraculously healed him in response to their collective faith. Here's the thing. When you and I make a decision between self and sacrifice, when you and I make a decision this year to say, hey, we will not let a barrier hold us back. We will not let circumstances prevent us. Look at this. When we carry the vision of Children's Church in faith, when we break through every barrier, which is financial or otherwise, and when we bring our treasure to Jesus, miracles happen. And people who were once lame get up and walk. When we build this Children's Church, children who are metaphorically lame, children who don't know a relationship and a friendship with Jesus will find one. And as you will see over tonight, as you've seen over tonight, and as you'll see tomorrow, There are many of you in the room today. You are here not because an adult invited you, but because your little one found their way to children's church or to youth. And because they were in children's church and youth, you saw a change in them. You saw Jesus in them. And you find yourself in this room tonight because of something your children did. But guess what? Someone paid for that children's legacy. Now it's time for each and every one of us to pay it forward. There's a legacy. There are people in this church tonight who built this church from the ground up. We've got people that are so mature in age they knew Moses personally. And because of them, this church is here. Not because of what Nikki and I have done. We've just taken the foundation that was already laid, the legacy that was already left, the legacy that was already built, the time, talent, and treasure of thousands of people over 45 years who invested constantly and made this happen. And all we would do is we were lucky enough to be a generation that walked in and said, thank you for the efforts you've done before. Let's take it further. Now, here's my prayer. That we're going to build a children's church next year. We're going to build that sucker. We're going to build it, man. And this is what's going to happen. My grandkids are going to step into that legacy. This is bigger, church. It's bigger than a building. It's not a building. It's not a building. It's people. It's young lives that need to meet Jesus. It's not a building, but it needs a building. Because here's the truth. Our collective faith makes all the difference. Leaving a legacy. Take note of this statement. It's a message in a sentence. You might have said this to me. Just wouldn't it have been easier if you just said this? Courageously putting self aside and doing whatever we can, bringing whatever we have in our hands to the feet of Jesus. Can I encourage you today to believe that this is not a building? It is a building, but it's not a building. Man, we've got kids' lives to change. Yes. Father, I thank you for tonight. I thank you for what you're doing in and through this house and through every heart and mind in this room. And I pray that you will touch every person, that you will give them the courage and the wisdom and the strength to take the thoughts on what it means to build a mentality of legacy and what it means to build a legacy that you can be proud of, and tie those godly thoughts together and to inspire us to live differently, not just to bring resource, but to live differently for eternity. And I pray that you'll touch every heart and mind here today. But I want to ask one more thing. If there are people in this room tonight who don't know the person of Jesus, can I just ask you that the reason that we're here, the reason we build this building, the reason we have people in the seats, it's the reason we have lights and screens and weird things and smoke and all that kind of stuff, is just to create an environment and atmosphere in which you can meet the person I love so much, Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior of my life and yours. And if you would like to have a friendship with Jesus, he's not looking for your perfection, he's looking for your potential. He doesn't need you to be perfect in any way, but Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. He also said this. He said, he who believes has everlasting life. You know what that means? We don't have to get it right. We just have to believe that he is the Son of God. And if we can believe that he's the Son of God, that he died for us, that he was buried, and 3 days later he rose from the dead, my word, our trajectory changes. And we start to begin leaving a legacy we can be proud of. And I want to ask you today that if you've never met this person, Jesus, that I'm referring to, but you'd like to, or maybe you have once met him, but you've drifted far from him, and you would like to connect with him and to build a relationship with him, then I'm going to ask you one simple thing. Can you, on the count of 3, just pop your hand up? When I see your hand, I'll pray for you. That's all that's going to happen. I'm going to ask you to do anything weird, just to pop your hand up and say, yes, I want to know this Jesus. I'm going to count of 3. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Shoot your hand up if you want to know this Jesus all across this room. Wonderful. So, Father, I thank you that you will bless every single person in this room, that we will leave differently. Bless them in the precious name of Jesus. And everyone said, come on, give God a huge hand for those people.
What an incredible service. We truly hope that it helped. And if you made a decision to follow Jesus, congratulations, we're celebrating with you. We want to encourage you, scan the QR code right now and we can help you on that journey, help you with that decision. What does that mean? What is your next step? We want to encourage you, you only have one next step, and that's fast forward. Fast forward is the on-ramp into church life. It will help you understand your decision, help you understand your next step, help you understand how to get integrated into church life. So sign up for Fast Forward. Once again, you can scan the QR code and we can get you connected through that as well. But remember, we say this each week, each one, reach one. Let's keep connecting, let's keep reaching, let's keep inviting, and we will see you next time.